we're talking with the great Nick Lowe, a guy who I've admired for a long time, and I'm honored to sit with you, Nick, here in your home in England. And it's great that we're talking today because I'm sure you're familiar with the Make It British movement, and today is Made in the UK Day.
Ah,
Uh,
I
one of
wasn't
the
aware of that.
well, what we are, because as a public radio station, something that we do every day, every year, is on this date, we play all artists from Great Britain, all
Mhm.
artists from the UK. And even last hour when I was on the air, I was playing you and Reckless Eric, even the Sutherland Brothers and Quiver. I got to
Oh,
play on the
fantastic.
radio,
Yeah.
as a public radio station. And I'm wondering, in your many years of traveling back and forth from England to the United States, is there anything musically that you have seen a difference between the UK and the US? Whether it's the music, the experience, the audience, anything at all that comes to mind when you think of the difference that between the UK and the US?
Yeah, I have. I think the main difference is that in the US, um, uh, uh, how can I put this? Well, for instance, if you go to this to the Louisiana, go down south, and go to a Cajun dance, you'll see people of all age groups, digging their own music. Well, no one really that doesn't exist here at all. No one goes to see English folk music, of all generations, all digging it. It does exist for a few fans, and they're generally a type, a type of person who likes that sort of thing. Whereas with more indigenous music, like you see in the States, I just used the Cajun thing as an example. That it's very evident that all age groups like that music and socialize to it and don't feel at all embarrassed that there's old people there. And that, I think, is something to be envied.
Do you find that that exists around the United States as a continent because it's so huge and there are different pockets of types of music versus I'm just going to say the phrase, British proper British of, stiff upper lip kind of thing, and people who are maybe hesitant to express themselves in a music situation, as opposed to America, where we have no problem expressing ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Yeah, yeah, I think that might have something to do with it, actually. Yes, we have much more sort of although they're breaking down now, but much more class limits, and strictures, than in the United States.
No,
And we can't help that, I'm afraid.
well, it comes with the culture, I'd
Yeah,
say,
I'm
and
afraid it does rather. Yeah.
centuries of history also,
Mm.
which we don't have. We only have 2.5 centuries of history here. In your travels, do any moments or memories or stories come to mind about Colorado, about being in our state? Because our radio station is called the Colorado Sound. We like to highlight the music of Colorado, but also the experiences of Colorado that are unique, and especially for someone like yourself who's traveled the world, grew up in England, still lives there. Does Colorado stand out in any way from in your memories and experiences?
Well, the it does actually, because the first show I ever played in the United States was in Denver, Colorado, and that was in 1976. I mean, the first actual, with an audience, proper audience and everything, and that was with Rockpile, the band I was in back then with Dave Edmunds, and we were opening for a Bad Company, and we showed up at the I guess it was the Mile High Stadium we were playing at. Well, we'd never seen anything as huge as that, and we couldn't believe that, because we just had the same equipment as we were using to play bars in London. We thought, man, no one's going to be able to hear us here. But anyway, we were told everything, and we had no idea about enormous PAs and systems and things like that. It's all rather sweet, actually, when you think about it, how naive we were. We thought we knew a bit more about stuff than that. But anyway, on we went, and to our astonishment, we decided to start off with this Bob Seger tune, "Get Out of Denver," which we liked, and it's got a real helter-skelter lyric. It just doesn't stop, and we thought this would be really cute, if we started with that. And anyway, about we'd only done about the halfway through the first verse, we realized that there wasn't any air in the place. The Mile High Stadium, we suddenly realized why it was so named. And anyway, we were singing this, or me and Edmonds were singing it together, and our eyes were bulging, veins standing out, on our neck. Anyway, people seemed to dig it. That was the thing that was most astonishing, that people went sort of crazy, and we didn't know how they were hearing us. But anyway, those were the days.
I can't help but be reminded of the Beatles at Shea Stadium with their little equipment.
Yeah.
In that sense. I heard Bob Weir, who recently left us, say once that he felt that the hardest job in show business was being a horn player at Red Rocks outside of Denver, for the same reason that you were speaking of.
Yes.
My next question is a little bit personal, because I have been a Stiff Records fan for many, many years, since the 70s. And I wonder if you, in your many years of doing what you're doing, whether it's when you're touring with Elvis Costello, or even just, sitting around your house having afternoon tea right there, do you ever reflect back on your early years, whether with Brinsley Schwartz or your initial solo years? Do you sit back and look at this vast experience that you have, and many different phases also? You've not been the same artist for that entire time, but it's easy for us as fans to see you in the scope of your work. But I wonder if maybe you're like Bob Dylan, who doesn't have a rear view mirror, and you just are looking forward. I wonder if you ever reflect back on your body of work.
Well, it's an interesting question, because I'm not very sort of sentimental about it, but it's always amusing, if I'm in company and someone mentions something that I happen to know something about from all those years ago, and as you get older, it's events that seem quite recent to you realize actually are quite a long time ago. In fact, this was brought home to me the other day. I was watching this new documentary about Wings, and the band I was in at that time, Brinsley Schwartz, were the opening act on Wings' first UK tour, and I was watching this and seeing the film that was taken at the time of the audiences. Amazing as it seems, that was a sort of a 3 or 4 week tour of the UK, when we were playing cinemas, basically. You'd think now the idea of Paul McCartney and Wings playing in a cinema, or a small theatre, and then going down the road, 30 miles and playing at another place like it just seems unbelievable. But the film that they had, the incidental film of the audiences, the way they were dressed, even though it was in colour, it looked like it was in black and white, and was something from the sort of interwar era of something. That is really strange to see, to have memories of that you think are quite recent, and then when you're confronted with them, suddenly you realize that it's not. It's 50 years ago or something.
It's something I can relate to, and it shouldn't surprise you, given that you and I have the same hairstyle.
Correct.
That I feel that same thing because I also saw Wings many years ago, mid 70s, and it doesn't feel like that long ago because the memories are still pretty strong for
Mm,
me.
yeah.
In the many years that you have been working, I feel that even if you never got on stage, you would still have a place in music history because of your producing, because of the many artists that you have produced. And I'm wondering if you have a preference. Does there one aspect of producing versus performing that speaks to you in a greater way that makes you that you enjoy more than the other,
Mm. Well, of
if at
course.
all?
Well, I haven't done any producing in quite a long time. I packed it in the 1980s, really, when almost overnight the way people made records changed, and it went from analog to digital. And initially, that the digital sounded so awful to me, when it first came out, that it really was like nails down a blackboard. That it I just could not bear the way that digital recording was, and I tried to cling on. There were a few recording studios that were still analog, but I knew that I wasn't that in love with it, and I, I I thought, well, it's just the way things are. The times they are changing. It's time to get out. If you don't like it anymore, stop doing it. And the analog studios, of course, one by one, all stopped operating. And um, so. But as when I think back to those days, and it's quite true, we I managed to be. I don't know what I did really in that um, when I was a record producer, but I must have done something because Elvis Costello, for instance, kept on asking me back, to do another record. And when I occasionally they play some of those old records on the radio, well, Reckless Eric, who you mentioned, for instance, Your Whole Wide World, and The Damned, New Rose, and all kinds of Elvis tunes, Pump It
Yeah.
Up, and um, New Lace Sleeves, and many, and I'm amazed by how good they sound, and that because back then we just seemed to be pumping it out. At one point, I was making two records a day, one with Elvis in the daytime, and one with Rockpile in the evening, and it that's just the way it was back then. We really got on with it. But yeah, that what was the gist of your question initially?
Well, just whether producing versus performing, and if there's
Oh,
one that you prefer.
well, performing I prefer because you get an instant reaction, from the people. With producing, you can get really sort of keen about things, and then when the record eventually comes out, no one cares about it at all. Off it goes. But occasionally, the moments when, and there were a few. The way it goes though is that there's far fewer fantastic moments. When you're onto something. You absolutely know you're onto something, and nobody else has heard it except the five or six of you in the room. And that a lot of people are going to be hearing the thing. Uh, that is really fantastic. Yeah, that really is great.
Well, I want to just reflect back on something that happened to me back in 2003. I got a chance to sit and talk to Rodney Crowell, and you guys share a title, former sons-in-law of Johnny Cash. And I want to ask you a question that I asked Rodney back then. Um, that question is, at the time that I sat with Rodney, I think Johnny had passed away maybe 6 weeks earlier. And the question I asked him was, with everything that's been written about Johnny, and especially in his obits and all the stories, is there anything that the public didn't know about him? Um, I'm not looking for any secrets, but just what part of Johnny's personality maybe didn't come out in all that has been written about him? And I know that you spent a lot of time with him back in the
Yeah,
80s.
so I wish I'd spent more time, but of course we were divided by a massive ocean, because I was living in London. Me and Carlene lived in London, and of course he was in the States. But I used to see him when he came to London, which was quite frequently, and of course I used to go to Nashville a lot in those days. I think probably the fact that he was such a laugh, he was a really his image was this man in black, tortured soul, and there's no doubt about it that there, that was there. But when I knew him, his career wasn't in a very good state. He was having to work really too hard, to keep pedaling too hard to keep the thing afloat, and it wasn't going great for him. But when I saw him, he was really was a good fun. I remember we used to listen to records together, and when he was in London, he stayed with me and Carlene, and it was just like listening to music with him was just like when I listened to records with my friends. He was a real enthusiast, and he'd say, "Oh, listen to this." And we'd have a couple of glasses of wine, and he it was all vinyl back then, but he said, "Oh, listen to this," just like my pals did, and sploshing wine around, and dropping the needle onto the track, and it was skidding a bit, to find the right cut he wanted to listen to, just like my pals did. And I remember pinching myself a couple of times and thinking, how the hell did this happen?
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
Johnny Cash sitting right there
yeah,
playing
Johnny
records
Cash
on
is
it.
swinging Johnny Cash. Yeah, no, he was great. I still miss him. I really do. He was terrific.
I remember Rodney telling me that Johnny was a big practical joker also. And
Oh,
he talked about how Johnny got a gift once from a friend, Rodney couldn't remember, that was a toilet seat emblazoned with flames. And the friend said, "This is your own ring of fire." Because Johnny was such a fun guy. How did you get connected with Low Straitjackets and the work that you guys have done? How did that even start?
well, it does seem strange, but it's not really because we both share a manager.
Oh,
So, and also I'd known them, on the sort of on the circuit, so to speak. But we got together because a few years ago, about it's getting on now. I don't know, 15 years or so ago, I released a Christmas record, and and it was very well received, especially in the United States. But very soon after it came out, two of the main people involved with making it, Bobby Owen, who played drums with me for many years on my records and live, and Neil Brockbank, who used to produce the records, really produce my records. They died one after the other, and it rather took the wind out of my sails, about touring this record, the Christmas record. And anyway, after a couple of years, the great thing about a Christmas record is that, of course, every Christmas, it's here it comes again, brand new.
yeah.
And so after a couple of years, it was suggested to me, why don't you go and do a few shows with Lost Straitjackets, Christmas shows with Lost Straitjackets. I thought that was a pretty good idea, and we went. We did these shows. It was barely a Christmas show, really. We did some tracks from the Christmas album and one or two old chestnuts, and the rest was a few songs from my catalogue, toe tap, upbeat, nothing too serious. and it went well. So we did it the next year, and the year after that, I think we did it in Europe. And then we thought we'd reached peak Christmas, and perhaps we were done with that. And somebody offered us a little tour of out of season work, and that's when it really started to get going. And I started writing songs for that project, and it really is a lot of fun. I still play with them. A couple of times a year. I think we get together and out we go, and we've got a great audience. There's a lot of young people come to those shows as well, which is fantastic. I'm really pleased about that.
I've noticed that because I've seen you twice with them, and there's just an energy to the show that they can't help but to bring to a show.
And yeah, they're really terrific. They're great musicians, and they're my kind of musicians. They can turn their hand to anything, and if they can't play it, they'll make a great imitation of it.
They'll give it a good go.
Yeah, give it a really good go. But also, of course, they're very, very agreeable people as well. I really like them personally very much indeed. So all in all, I'm a lucky fellow.
Yeah. My next question has another visual, and I'm just going to move my camera here for just a second of something that's right above my desk. That I have a set of rock pile pins.
Oh yeah, I see
on
them.
my wall. So it causes me to want to ask, how's Dave doing these days after a little scare that he had last year?
Well, I wish I could tell you. I don't have anything much to do with Dave, which I'm very, very sorry about. But he is extremely reclusive, and I know, yeah, we were all worried about that. And I've heard various rumors. I believe he's made something of a recovery, but I know really nothing else. And I wish it was. I really, really wish it was otherwise.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people that would love to see a small or large tour of Rockpile since you're all still here.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
No, I know, but we can all, the audacity of hope, a phrase
Yeah.
that.
No, the thing is, it sounds great, but the reality just isn't there. It just wouldn't be the same.
Well, it's the same thing.
The memory is much more powerful, really.
It's the same thing that Robert Plant has said about any kind of a quote unquote Led Zeppelin reunion. He said, without Bonham, it just is not, and I'm not going to go there because of that. And just end of story. Unless, of course, it's the Ahmet Erdogan tribute show. But then it's not really what Robert is. He did that for Ahmet, not for Zeppelin.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best part of being Nick Lowe?
Wow.
For you?
Well, that's quite a question.
Yeah, maybe I should have sent it to you in advance.
Well, I feel very lucky that I've managed with help. I've been very lucky that the people that I've met along the way, that I've become involved with, who have helped me, but have helped me to be able to work in this business at my own pace and do what I want to do, when I want to do it. That's a real luxury, and to be able to make a living. I've never really, apart from when I was a kid, and I first got into it, I really wanted to be famous, for all the reasons that all kids who aspire to be in a rock and roll band want to be famous, mainly to meet girls. That was it, and it worked actually for a while. But it's amazing how quickly you get tired of that, realize that actually something else has got to happen. And I had a real eye opener about fame and what it can do to you, and how you've got to really, really treat it with a great deal of respect. Otherwise, it will mess you up. And I got an event happened to us that gave us a look behind the curtain. What a kind of tawdry business this is. And not at all glamorous. There is glamour, but it's a tough business. And so I made a deal, that I'm going to stay out of it. I've got to be careful what I say here, because it sounds a bit grand to say, oh, I could have been famous many times, but I said, no, thank you. So that's not quite what I'm getting at. You want to walk a fine line through being, you won't be a household name. That's it really. You make a deal, say, I will not be a household name if I can just do what I work at my own speed and do what I want. I'll be quite happy, to pay, as long as I can pay the rent and play with good musicians and do the kind of music I want. Then you don't have to worry about me, getting all bitter and twisted because I'm not headlining some enormous Superdome, which I've opened for thousands of groups in those places. And believe me, opening act is the spot to go for every time.
A lot less weight, a lot less responsibility.
Oh, yeah, far more fun. Far more fun. Not as much money, but way more fun. And that's really what I've aimed to do. And I can't believe that I am still, anyone wants to turn out to see me. I'm delighted. I'm looking forward to not only the Straight Jackets things I'm doing later this year, but when we come to Boulder in a couple of weeks, I guess, with
end
the
of next week.
Blossoms.
Yeah. You'll be in Boulder, you'll be in Colorado Springs, and also Fort Collins, which is north of Boulder. Also,
Fort Collins, yeah.
I'll see you at 2 of those shows.
Oh, good. Excellent.
As I mentioned, Nick Lowe, you'll be here in Colorado next week. The Boulder Theater on Friday, March 20th. You'll be in Colorado Springs Saturday, the 21st, and then Sunday, the 22nd at the Fort Collins Armory, continually on the go, a different place each night. It's nice that you can keep moving and play a lot of shows for us in Colorado next week.
I'm thrilled. There's the demand in Colorado for this this show.
We'll have the oxygen ready for you if you need it.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
Like at Mile High Stadium. Nick Lowe, we so appreciate you spending time with the Colorado Sound, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.